Brothers and sisters, you want to have fun right now? Let's take a look. Church News just dropped this 3 minutes ago at 200 temples announced and under construction and constructed over the 7 year tenure, if you would call it a tenure, of the prophet Russell M. Nelson. Welcome to the last dispensation. You're living in it.
We don't really know where the world is gonna go, but now everybody knows that you can't stop for too long. Got to keep going. Don't really know where the world is gonna go.
A by the numbers look at the 200 temples announced by President Nelson. Breakdowns include announcements by date and year, current status, and first, multiple, and total temples in specific areas, countries, territories, and states. By the way, I didn't have time to put up the burnt in captions, but if you hit CC, I have my own captions also in CC, so you won't get the defaulted screwed up ones. You'll get 99% accurate from me. I won't claim 100 because it's not always 100, but it's way better than the other CC. So click that little CC button down there and you'll get my captions as well. They're not as clear and white and big as the burnt in, but I sometimes I don't have time to burn in the captions. But hit CC and you'll get mine as well. But they're in a little box anyway. Okay. Breakdowns, including announcements by date and year, current status, and first, multiple and total temples in specific areas, countries, territories, and state. Here's a picture of a temple. Look, crosses. Neat. Where is that one? That must be somewhere that is maybe predominantly Catholic, but that is so cool. I like that. Yeah. Argentina. Yeah, the Argentina temple announced April 2018 and dedicated. Norway by Scott Taylor. With the 15 new temple locations he identified at the conclusion of April 2025 General Conference, President Russell M. Nelson has announced 200 temples in his 7 years as president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He's been more than half the temples in existence announced, under construction, already have been constructed. Total conceived temples, he's been part of half of them. That's amazing. That means that of the church's 382 total houses of the Lord dedicated under construction, announcement, and planning, he's announced 52.4% of that total. And to put the 200 temples announced in 7 years ratio in perspective, the Deseret Peak, Utah temple, the church's 200 dedicated house of the Lord, was dedicated by President Nelson just 5 months ago on November 10th, 2024, nearly 195 years after the organization of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And President Nelson has announced 200 new temples in just 7 years and 5 days. The averages for temple announcements would be a new location every 12.8 days of his tenure as president of the church. Talk about hastening. Talk about the Lord exponentially growing the kingdom of heaven. That's just one way to take a by the numbers look at the 200 temples President Nelson has announced. Temple totals and announcements by date, year, and location are just some of the categories included below. All information is current as of April 8th, and the continental designations are for North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Oceania. For example, President Nelson has made temple announcements in each of the 15 general conferences held over the almost 7 years since being set apart as president of the church in January 2018. All but one of the 200 have come in a conference session. The 15 he announced on Sunday, April 6th, marked the 8th time he has announced 15 or more temples in one setting, all since April 2021. That's a lot, brothers and sisters. If that is not proof that the Lord is growing his gospel here upon the earth, preparing us for the second coming of Jesus Christ so that we can enter the temple and learn to love the Savior, learn to know him. I don't know what is. The 15 he announced on Sunday, April 6th, marked the 8th time he has announced 15 or more temples in one setting, all since April 2021. The most temples President Nelson has announced in a calendar year, 35, has happened twice in 2022 and 2023. And he has announced 30 plus temples each year since 2021. So add up the temples. So add up the 35 temples announced each in 2022 and 23, the 34 from 21, the 32 from 24, and the 15 so far in 2025. And that totals 151 temples President Nelson has announced in just 4 years, from April 2021 to April 2025. The April 1998 General Conference. Ooh, what's it got to say about that? President Gordon B. Hinckley announced plans to construct as many as 32 new temples, and that was huge, right? Although he did not list specific locations, throughout that year, the first presidency announced the locations of 27 of those temples. Look at that sky. Look at that sky. The Deseret Peak, Utah Temple in. So you have a list here, brothers and sisters, of the 200 new temple locations President Nelson has announced. The breakdown in current status as of Tuesday, April 8th, including the 15 announced locations from April 2025 General Conference and recent dedication announcements. 24 temples dedicated, 5 temples scheduled for dedication, 46 temples under construction, 4 temples scheduled for groundbreaking, 53 temples with site locations identified, 68 announced temples in planning and design. Every effort is made to construct temples in an expeditious manner. Love that word, because it is a hastening. At times, various reasons may delay a temple's completion and dedication. President Nelson has announced temples on 16 occasions, all but one coming in General Conference. The sole exception was a temple for Ephraim, Utah on May 1st, 2021, at the same time announcing plans to preserve through renovation the pioneer craftsmanship, artwork, and character of the Manti, Utah temple. Also, of the 15 times President Nelson has announced new temple locations in general conferences, 14 have been at the conclusion of the Sunday afternoon sessions. The exception, he announced 8 new temples during the Saturday evening women's session of October 2019 General Conference. And here are the dates. So, brothers and sisters, I'm not going to vet these all through. It would just be redundant, but I'll leave the link. You can look at all of these and watch how President Nelson has so far been, and this percentage has grown, but that he's been a part of 52.4% of the total conceived temples of the church. Look at this. It goes on and on. The countries, territories, dedicated, scheduled to be dedicated, current status of under construction. I'm definitely not going to look at all these, but you go through them, check it out. I'll leave the link. Isn't that neat? Fun stuff, right? We live in the greatest time that men and women can be alive.